What is the greatest Ohio State football team ever? It's a question that Buckeye fans will debate to the end of time. Is it the super sophomores of 1968 or Hop Cassidy's 1954 crew? Maybe it's Paul Brown's 1942 team or even John Cooper's powerful 1998 squad. Whoever it is, the debate would not be complete without a team that many often overlook. The team Woody Hayes called his greatest ever, the 1973 Ohio State Buckeyes.
The 1973 Ohio State Buckeyes were one of the most dominant and decorated teams in the history of college football.
The 4 years that I played, that was probably the best team that we had.
Our first team really didn't play a whole lot because of the leads that we had.
We had Archie Griffin in the backfield. We had Champ Henson. We had Pete Johnson. Brian Bashnagel was an outstanding wingback.
John Hicks came in second that year. Randy Gradishaw, Archie was in the top 10. So we had three guys off one team to be in the top 10 in the Heisman balloting.
It was just an outstanding group that came together and gelled to create a great football team.
It was also a time when a legendary coach was at the summit of his success, having risen to the peak of national prominence both on the field and off. Now, in 1973, with 3 national titles already in tow, Woody Hayes, college football's ultimate field general, had assembled perhaps his greatest team yet.
There could be a lot of arguments made that the 1973 team was maybe the greatest Ohio State team ever assembled. The offensive team was awesome. Maybe the defensive team was even better than the offensive team.
Together, they were the immovable object and the unstoppable force rolled into one. Only a hard-fought tie in one of the most famous and controversial Ohio State-Michigan games ever prevented the Buckeyes from a perfect season, while setting the stage for one of the Big Ten's most contentious events.
The vote ended up being like 6-4, somewhere in there. It was in our favor, and I think it was the right vote.
Michigan should have gone to the Rose Bowl in '73, and I'm still bitter about it.
The unprecedented conference vote put the Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl, where they redeemed their season with a crushing defeat of USC. And while the tie to Michigan cost the Buckeyes the national title, it could not diminish the remarkable achievements of the 1973 Buckeyes, Ohio State's last unbeaten team. As the Buckeyes took the field for the start of the 1973 season, they did so with just one goal in mind: winning the national championship. The team returned a bevy of talent on both sides of the ball, from a 1972 team that went 9-2, losing only to Michigan State in a 19-12 upset in East Lansing, and in the Rose Bowl to eventual national champion Southern Cal. Perhaps the most highly anticipated return was that of now sophomore tailback Archie Griffin. In 1972, the 18-year-old Columbus native burst onto the college football landscape with a record-setting 239-yard performance in just the second game of the season. Thought by some to be too small for big-time college football, the 5'8", 185-pound Griffin proved his critics wrong by rushing for a then freshman record of 867 yards. Joining Griffin in the backfield was the nation's 1972 scoring leader, bruising fullback Champ Henson. Henson's 20 rushing touchdowns were a reflection of Woody Hayes' time-tested strategy of pounding his opponents into submission, especially near the goal line. The cornerstone of that design was the muscle up front, and the 1973 Buckeyes returned 2 of the best linemen to ever don the scarlet and gray.
When you look at the offensive line, particularly in that 1973 team, the 2 tackles were John Hicks and Kurt Schumacher. I'm not sure Ohio State ever had any better offensive tackles at one time than those 2 people. Woody Hayes not only had great talent in the backfield, but he had really surrounded that talent with a lot of players at other positions.
Notably absent from the starting lineup, however, was 1972's starting quarterback and 1973 co-captain Greg Hare. In his place was a lanky, fleet-footed, free-spirited sophomore from Washington, D.C., Cornelius Green.
Corny was an interesting guy. He was a tremendous athlete. We used to call him Flam, for flamboyant, and that he was.
He had a Lincoln Continental. You've seen the Lincoln Continentals with those great big tires in the back end of the car where it says Continental. His says Cornelius.
But Green provided more than just a colorful personality. His elusive moves and sprinter's speed gave the Buckeye ground game a virtually unstoppable triple threat.
We went from a team that had a real good quarterback to a great football team. I mean, absolutely great football teams, because you could not stop all three facets of our attack at that point. We ran the option, we ran the toss sweep, we ran the off-tackle play, and we ran the fullback.
He had a tremendous amount of talent, running ability. He could have been an outstanding running back for any college football team. He wasn't a great drop-back type passer, but for what we were doing, he was able to provide the skills that we needed to have an effective offense.
Hayes' decision to go with Green also established Corny as Ohio State's first black quarterback, a factor that caused more controversy with fans than with the team.
Folk would say, well, Ohio State would never play a black quarterback. It would never be an all-black backfield. It's hard to even think about. In 1972, they were saying things like that. Woody proved that if you were good enough, you would play.
I think Ohio State and Woody was way ahead of his time in seeing guys for what they were and not seeing them as black or white, but just seeing them as players.
He never looked at me as an African-American. He always looked at me as just a team member. He never played that up big. I never played it up big. He's the reason why I came here. He's the reason why that I feel so proud about this school now. I think I'm a better human being now, but I don't think I would have been able to do that without being under Coach Hayes' tutorage for 4 years.
Ohio State's 1973 season kicked off against the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and the Buckeyes arrived for their debut performance in mid-season form. Their 56-7 blowout win was a clear indication of how the Buckeyes intended to treat their opponents, without mercy. It also showcased the multitude of weapons contained in the Buckeyes' arsenal. Champ Henson, the nation's leading scorer from 1972, picked up where the previous season left off, hitting pay dirt 3 times. And Archie Griffin's 93-yard touchdown kickoff return announced his ascendancy from freshman phenom to sophomore star. Even newcomers like quarterback Cornelius Green and wingback Brian Baschnagel appeared ready to assume primetime roles in the Buckeye attack. And where the offense flourished, the defense stifled. Leading the charge was All-American linebacker Randy Gradishar.
Gradishar was not only an intense ball player and a hard hitter, but he was very intelligent. He led not by words, but by actions.
He's almost like Little Lord Fauntleroy. You couldn't believe that this guy could be a fierce linebacker. But boy, sideline to sideline, Randy Gradishar was just an unbelievable guy.
Gradishar's quiet leadership provided the anchor to one of the most athletic and complete defenses in Ohio State history.
I don't know that Ohio State ever had 3 better linebackers at one time than Randy Gradishar, Vic Cagle, and Rick Middleton. The defensive line was awesome. Pete Cusick, and then Arnie Jones, who was really another linebacker but was so talented, they placed him at the other tackle spot. And then you had Van DeCree and Jim Cope at the ends. In that defensive backfield, there was Tim Fox and Rich Parsons and Neil Colsey and Steve Luke. So this was an extremely well-talented team.
As the season progressed, the talented and tenacious Buckeye D yielded precious little. In fact, next to nothing.
There was a 5-game span there in the middle of the season where Indiana scored 7 points on them, and that was the only scoring done against Ohio State within a span of 5 weeks.
There was such a chemistry and a bond between the coaches and the players, and there was a mutual respect. And I just think that when you have that unique blend, positive things are going to happen, and it was reflected in our defense.
As the defense posted shutouts, the offense lit up scoreboards. Not even a season-ending knee injury to fullback Champ Henson could derail the Buckeye offense.
Champ got hurt early that year, and Bruce Elia moved into the fullback position early in the season. from a linebacker.
From linebacker to fullback. And he had an unbelievable year.
Elia's transition from defense to offense, as well as the emergence of freshman Pete Johnson, helped pave the way for tailback Archie Griffin and his growing string of 100-yard games. By the end of the season, the offense was in overdrive, and Griffin exploded for a new single-game rushing record of 246 yards against Iowa, eclipsing his previous record set just 1 year before. Even the special teams, marked by Neil Colsey's electrifying punt returns, were the class of college football. Vanquished foes could only marvel as they paid their respects from the Buckeyes' wake. All that remained for the nation's top team was a trip to Ann Arbor and a battle against their ultimate nemesis, Michigan. Like the Buckeyes, the fourth-ranked Wolverines entered the game undefeated and, for the most part, unchallenged. And as it was throughout most of the 70s, the Big Ten title and a trip to the Rose Bowl, indeed the entire success or failure of the season, would hinge on one game.
That game is everything. You judge the success of your program on the basis of what you do against Ohio State.
No game was ever as physical as the Michigan game. And it was because of the intensity and the emotion that the game was played with.
That emotion was stoked even further by the pregame remarks of Michigan quarterback and Ohio native Dennis Franklin.
Dennis Franklin, who I grew up with in Massillon, made the dubious comment that only good players from Ohio go to Michigan.
And you can imagine how we reacted to that. And so, we were fired up just by looking at something like that, saying that, you're not any good if you go to Ohio State. Only the good ones go to Michigan.
Hayes and the Buckeyes begged to differ and planned to prove Franklin wrong, the old-fashioned way.
Well, that's what he gets. He gets so conservative, but he says, to hell with it. We'll just pound it out that way, and we'll break them down, and we'll break their backs.
The best thing we did was run the football, and the best thing we did was run up the middle. We weren't flashy. Yeah, maybe we were a little conservative, but that conservativeness was our strength.
Adding to Woody's button-down game plan was an injury to quarterback Cornelius Green's throwing hand, suffered the week before against Iowa. Hayes kept Green in the lineup, but passing the ball, a rarity in any game, was strictly off limits.
The fact that Woody would go from not feeling comfortable throwing the ball to, we weren't going to throw the ball anyway. I mean, that's just the way it was.
Leading 3-0 late in the first half, Woody's strategy started to pay off. A series of straight-ahead sprints by Archie Griffin moved the ball to the Wolverine 5. And with less than a minute remaining in the half, Pete Johnson bulled in for the game's first touchdown. The extra point gave the Buckeyes a 10-0 lead, a lead they took into the half. Throughout the third quarter, the Ohio State defense continued to hold the upper hand. But in the fourth, the Buckeye D started to buckle. Mike Lantry's 30-yard field goal at the start of the quarter put the Wolverines on the board, and just minutes later, Dennis Franklin's option run tied the game at 10. Both teams failed to score on their next possessions, and with just 61 seconds left, Hayes hoped for a miracle. Forced to pass, he put Greg Hare in at quarterback, but Hare's first down pass was picked off, and the Wolverines regained possession deep inside Ohio State territory. 2 plays later, and with just 28 seconds remaining, the Wolverines would try a 28-yard field goal to win the game.
Here's the boot. It's up. No good. Outside it.
3 desperation passes by the Buckeyes fell flat, and the game would end in a deadlock. It looked like the Buckeyes' dream season was over. But one of the Big Ten's most dramatic debates was just about to unfold. The 1973 Ohio State Buckeyes entered the season with their sights set squarely on winning the national title. But a disappointing tie against Michigan made even a Rose Bowl trip appear unlikely.
Well, here we have one of the greatest Ohio State teams of all time, but the season ended on kind of a low note with the 10-10 tie-up at Michigan, particularly with the way the team played in the second half.
After the 10-10 tie, I automatically assumed that we weren't going to the Rose Bowl. I did feel like we lost the game, even though it was a tie.
The tie left both teams knotted atop the Big Ten standings and created a problem. Which team would go to the Rose Bowl? In past years, the issue would have been settled by the league's so-called no-repeat rule. But the Big Ten repealed the statute after the 1972 season, thanks in large part to the influence of Michigan Athletic Director Don Canham.
Canham was very much against the no-repeat rule and was very forceful in getting that rule repealed. Well, it came back to bite the University of Michigan because the first year that became effective was 1973, and Ohio State won the vote of the Big Ten athletic directors. It was reported as being 6-4, and they became the first team under this new procedure to be able to go to the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row.
It was a shock all the way around. Probably more to Bo than anybody else.
I know for a fact the athletic director at Illinois, because Bob Blackman had told me, at a cocktail party the night before said he's voting for Michigan, and the next morning he voted for Ohio State.
If ever anybody probably had the idea that they wanted to kill somebody, it was Bo Schembechler after that vote, because I don't think he could believe what had happened. There were a lot of people who couldn't.
It was a surprise. I'd figured that we had gone the year before, but at the same time, I was rationalizing. I'm saying, hey, but we tied at their place. I mean, so that has to stand for something.
Woody said they always favored Michigan. Boys, they never liked Ohio State. We're going to be home. So when we got the vote, he just couldn't believe it.
I think even some of the most loyal of Ohio State fans were a little bit surprised that the Buckeyes, rather than the Wolverines, had been selected to go. But they had a couple injuries to a couple key players late in the game, and maybe that swayed some votes.
The key to Michigan, and the whole world knew it, was Denny Franklin. And without Denny Franklin, Michigan's just an average team. So I strongly felt that based on the fact that Dennis had gotten hurt, that we had a real good shot at getting voted in.
Whether that's justification or not, doesn't make sense. They could have won without Dennis Franklin, too.
I had a great backup quarterback by the name of Larry Sippa. Played pro ball for several years. I mean, it wasn't like we'd gone in there bare quarterback, because that wasn't true at all. But that was their excuse.
I don't think Bo ever got over it. That was stuck in his craw forever.
Michigan should have gone to the Rose Bowl in '73, and I made no bones about it, and I went after everybody that voted against us. And I'm still bitter about it. I have not changed on that at all.
Woody Hayes was obviously jubilant. He thanked the athletic directors for the choice and immediately said we need to get to work on that bowl game. There's one game this year we didn't win. We've got to redeem ourselves, and we'll make a good representative for the Big Ten out in the Rose Bowl, which they did.
Indeed, the Buckeyes bounced back with one of their most impressive bowl game performances ever. Their 42-21 whipping of 7th-ranked Southern Cal redeemed the Buckeyes season and silenced any potential critics.
In the back of our minds was the fact that we were representing the Big Ten. The Big Ten showed confidence in us in putting us out here. We've got to get out here and represent the Big Ten well. If we don't win this football game, everybody would be saying Michigan should have been playing the Rose Bowl. Us winning that football game, I think, kept a lot of people pretty quiet.
The win also exacted a measure of revenge for a 42-17 defeat at the hands of the Trojans exactly 1 year before. After the game, Woody called it his greatest victory and lobbied the press for the national title. But the Buckeyes would have to settle for second, and questions of what might have been.
We feel as though we demonstrated to the country that we were the best team in the country that year, but because of the tie, we didn't get the national championship.
I do feel like one got away because I certainly thought that was a team that should have been a national champion. No question in my mind.
We have the best defense in the country. We have a record number of All-Americans on both offense and defense. We go out to the Rose Bowl, we blow them away. The only blemish is a 10-10 tie. That's frustrating.
Still, the tie with Michigan and the near-miss national title could not diminish the amazing achievements and the lasting legacy of the 1973 Buckeyes, one of Ohio State's greatest teams ever.
The excellence of Ohio State's 1973 Buckeyes did not go unrecognized. 10 players made the All-Big Ten team, and 4 were named first-team All-Americans. But on a team of stars, perhaps no single player stood out more than offensive tackle John Hicks. Hicks not only won the Lombardi Award and the Outland Trophy given to the nation's top lineman, he also finished second in the balloting for the Heisman Trophy, the highest finish ever for an offensive lineman. To this day, no offensive lineman has ever finished higher than 4th. For Buckeye Classics, I'm Archie Griffin. Thanks for watching.